Hello, everyone, and welcome to introducing VMware Tanzu application platform, a new developer experience. My name is Valentina Daria, and I'm a product director here at VMware, responsible for Tanzu application platform outcomes. Just the usual disclaimer slide. I'm going to be talking quite a bit about things that we're working on. They will be landing in the future, so I want to make sure that you're aware of the usual disclaimers. All right, so what are we going to be covering today? We're going to be talking about challenges that organizations face when building application platforms on Kubernetes. We're going to be talking quite a bit about, of course, how Tanzu application platform helps our customers and users achieving the outcomes that they want to achieve on top of Kubernetes as an underlying infrastructure. And I want to walk you through what we're doing to really improve the developer and operator experience on Kubernetes with Tanzu application platform. So what are some of the challenges that customers and users we talk to on a regular basis face when they're looking at getting started with Kubernetes? So first and foremost is the fact that very often organizations are trying to solve Kubernetes challenges by building solutions themselves in-house. Kubernetes is clearly a very powerful infrastructure layer. But as teams are looking at building and running and operating applications on top of Kubernetes, organizations are going and building application platforms in-house. So a lot of these solutions very much look and feel like bags of parts. And what we mean by that is a bit of a fragmented experience where you bring together a lot of components to help solve these very critical problems. So for quite a bit of organizations, this means that they have more than one platform to help them solve their problems. And that for teams that are working with these platforms, there's intrinsic architectural challenges that they need to face. And so this is a very foundational starting point for us as we look at partnering with organizations like yourself to help you solve some of these internal problems and help you build a cohesive platform that helps you support very different use cases. If you think about Kubernetes, one of the learning curves that we hear about when we talk to users and customers that are getting started on the journey with Kubernetes is primarily the one around developer experience. As I mentioned earlier, Kubernetes is a very powerful infrastructure abstraction layer. But when it comes to supporting application teams' outcomes, it can feel a bit, you can feel there's some shortcomings there. The idea being that there is concerns that are platform and infrastructure specific that end up landing on the developer and application operators' lap. Developers have to deal with understanding a lot of components that exist within Kubernetes. They need to learn about networking concerns and security concerns and services concerns and deployments concerns that are very much outside of their realm. And one thing that we hear a lot about is this wall of YAML. There's number of configuration files that developers need to learn about and understand how to use and leverage. The other piece of the puzzle here is sort of the counterparts to developers, and it's how application operators and platform operators can support different teams and different applications on their path to production. So the idea here is that you, of course, want to sort of establish a path to production. You want to establish a set of tooling that will help your organization support different teams and different applications as they get ready to move from a dev environment to a staging environment to a production environment. And the reality is there is really not one size that fits all. It's really hard to build one, what we call supply chains, or one path to production, or one set of DevOps tooling that will satisfy the requirements of your entire organization. And if you're trying to go and customizing, all of this path to production, so you end up with having a very fragmented experience, very much, having multiple of those parallel path to productions that you need to go and support. And these leads to, of course, a lot of complexity. And so it's really important to think about, what you're trying to achieve here, which is getting code to production fast, in a predictable, reliable, and continuous way. Deploying it across a variety of environments, supporting the requirements of multiple teams, leveraging automated practices, and all trying not to, of course, kill your organization with a huge amount of complexity. The last piece of sort of the challenges that organizations face is that of securing this supply chain or securing this path to production. And this becomes particularly important as you further embrace the Kubernetes ecosystem and you embrace the open source ecosystem. And being able to think about how to bring your best practices, how you secure components within your organization to your supply chain path itself, and to components you're adopting from outside of your organization, right? To open source components to projects that exist in the larger Kubernetes ecosystem. As your organization evolves, as you embrace more of this DevSecOps and shift left model, where you want to bring security checkpoints earlier and earlier in the application lifecycle. So all of this said, this can feel a bit overwhelming for organizations as they embark on their journey with Kubernetes. But we do truly believe that Kubernetes is a powerful platform and powerful infrastructure platform on top of which we recommend organizations build their platforms and application team tooling. And what we're doing with Tanzu application platform is very much helping address a lot of the concerns we've been highlighting here. So what is Tanzu application platform? Tanzu application platform is three things. It's very much a lot of unlocking of that developer experience and developer productivity. So what we want to make sure here is that we build a solution that really helps developers achieve their goals, being able to work on code, being able to take outcomes that the organizations are asking them to work on, really thinking about their end users and scenarios that they're trying to satisfy here, and not having to worry about making sense of Kubernetes and the ecosystem and the tooling and everything that exists in the environment there. And so we really think about how do we make sure that developers have a delightful experience on top of Kubernetes, where they can quickly get started, where they can quickly get bootstrapped in their journey, where they don't have again to sort through which tooling to use for which portion of the journey. Now this needs to come though paired with a sustainable and rapid path to production. So what it means here is that as part of Tanzu application platform, we're bringing together to you all the tooling that you need to establish this path to production. So we give you the ability to build an application. We need to give you the ability to deploy this application. We give you the ability to deploy this application with some production quality constraints. We give you the ability to, of course, monitor and operate that application. And all of this comes out of the box. But we also want to make sure that this supply chain, this path to production that we give you, it's something that makes sense within your organization. So we give you what we call batteries included and some predefined options to start from so that there is very low complexity both for the developer and for the operator supporting these developers. But we want to make sure that you as an operator and your organization, if you have made already choices in terms of I'm standardizing on a specific tool, this is what I'm using across the organization, that you're able to bring in these tools and components within your path to production in a way that it's extremely seamless and simple. And last but not least, we want to make sure that there's clear separation of concerns between the developers and the operators. What this means is that we want to make sure that developers have this very delightful and simple experience, and that this experience maintains throughout the lifecycle of that application. So we want to start from when the developer is just testing out their application, of course, to the time where that application is ready to move to a team working on the outcomes for that application, and what we usually refer to as a staging environment, all the way to a production environment. And ideally, right, the goal is that the developer is interacting with the platform in the exact same way, regardless of where that application lives. And this is really important, and it's achieved through this separation and coordination of concerns between the developers and the operator persona. So the operator can come in and say, hey, the tooling that the developers end up using when they're in dev look like X, and they're very lightweight. They're all about rapid iteration. As we move closer to staging and production, they're going to be using a different set of tools, but it's going to be completely transparent to the developer itself. So you can see how this coordination and separation of concerns becomes really critical to achieve this great developer experience and get support this customizable and sustainable path to production. So I often describe Tanzu application platform as a modular and composable platform, as I said earlier, but also I like to refer to it as an app-aware platform. So what this means is that we move from a place where developers are building applications that are ultimately and intrinsically platform-aware apps. They need to understand a lot about the platform. Some of the platform concerns that I had in one of the previous slides when I was talking about the developer experience gap. This is what I meant, right? The developer, it's very much building an application that has a lot of hooks and understanding of the infrastructure and platform layer. And as the platform changes, because they're going from one platform to another, from one environment to the other, the application needs to change and be very much aware of these underlying components. So what we are doing with Tanzu application platform is instead taking you to a place where there is an app-aware platform, and the application is very much unaware of what the platform underneath does and which tooling is being used. So now developers can focus on defining requirements for the application. It enables this shift left model, right? So the developer is willing now to allow for some of these DevSecOps concerns to happen a lot earlier in the application lifecycle because they're not responsible for those, because they're happening in a way that it's fully transparent to the developer itself. It allows for portability across environments. So whether you're in development or in staging or in production, this is going to look exactly the same. And a lot of the best practice of the platforms are automatically applied. One of the things, and this is very much sort of like a deep dive into some of the capabilities of Tanzu application platform. One of the things that it's really important here is that when the developer defines their application, which is made of a bunch of components, one of which is what we call the workload. When the developer defines that workload, the application and platform operators are able to add some description to this workload in a way that the best practices of the organization are applied automatically to the workload, to the application as it gets deployed into Kubernetes environments. So this makes for a very powerful solution, of course. It can really support application teams on their journey forward on Kubernetes. So as we shift over into the second half of this talk today, I want to ground us on a couple of concepts here. I'll be walking you through a bit of the developer experience and a bit of the operator DevSecOps experience here in the next few slides. And very much the way I encourage you to think about it is that the developer experience very much revolves around the notion and concept of an inner loop. The inner loop, it's usually everything that it's around the developer and it's around that rapid iteration of an application. So the developer gets a Jira ticket with a new requirements for a new app to be built, and they start from coding, whatever their environment, whatever their environment looks like. They start coding that application and they want to iterate. And as they learn about the requirements and they experiment with it, they usually want something that is very lightweight, that can live within their existing environment. And as they make progress on that application, they want to make sure they can leverage all the patterns, the cloud patterns that are going to be ultimately in place when the application is deployed to production. Now, we call that the developer personal environment. So it's very much all around that developer is a single person and supporting them in their everyday job. Now, as the developer gets ready to move that application through the next stages, we usually see, and this, of course, may look slightly different in different organizations, but we often see the developers then getting started in collaborating with more folks within their teams. And so when we go through, when we start shifting to this teams sort of environments and interactions, that's where we see a lot more of the DevOps tooling coming into the picture. So usually we see the transition from this inner loop to the outer loop to be something like, oh, now the developer is actually ready to commit this code to a Git repo, so that others within the organization are able to get their eyes on this and help them and interact with this new application as it gets defined. And as the application further progresses through staging and production, we very much live in that outer loop, which is all about getting the application ready for prod, making sure that we have the right tooling and checks and balances in place here, making sure that we can automate as much as possible. We can apply all the best practices of the organization as needed. So in the next few slides, I'm going to show you how the experience that we're building maps to these two loops and the things that the developer and operator can do with that. All right, so jumping into the developer experience first. One of the things that is critical here is that the developer wants to have access to cloud native patterns easily, right? So the idea is a developer gets started with Kubernetes and they want to get started in a way that it's really simple and really straightforward. And so what we're doing is we're building the notion of accelerators, which are very much blueprints or templates that developers can use so that they can get that initial repo or local directory set up for them automatically based on their needs for an application to have specific languages, specific integrations with backend components and such. Everything is sort of set up automatically for them. So very much that bootstrapping experience becomes a lot easier for the developer. And this is something that is available in beta for you to start testing and experimenting with, of course, as part of the broader Tanzu application platform beta. The other thing that is critical here is that we see more and more these API first or API centric development patterns emerge within the organizations. So what we want to make sure is that developers have a way to search and leverage API endpoints that are published by others within the organization. So there has to be an easy way to publish. There isn't, has to be an easy way to search and leverage these API endpoints as part of the developer application, creation workflow. And so this is an aspect of Tanzu application platform that we refer to as API portal, which is something that is available as a GA component standalone, as well as part of the broader Tanzu application platform beta availability as well. Now, these two initial starting points, the accelerators and the API portal, really get the developer going in their journey. And one of the things that we've been hearing a lot from the users who we've been working with is that developers want the tooling and the experiences that we're building for Tanzu application platform to exist very close to their traditional tooling, which is very much the IDE for a lot of developers out there. And so what we've been doing with Tanzu application platform is to build IDE plugins that enable developers to use very easily Tanzu application platform within the context of the IDE itself, as well as pre-packaging all the dev tooling that they need so that they can easily do things like live reload and debugging within the context of their personal environment. The last thing from a developer journey perspective is that we want to make sure that as the developer works on their application, as they get their application deployed on a cluster, they have a very easy and simple way to figure out what is happening with the application, right? Often something may be wrong, right? And they need help debugging. And so there's a few things that we're doing there, both on the IDE front, where we'll be building, debugging tooling and capabilities, as well as with an aspect of Tanzu application platform that we call application live view, which is a very lightweight tool that can be sort of automatically instrumented into the application path so that developers have an easy way to sort of go through their journey of not just working their application, getting bootstrapped really easily with accelerators, of course, having all their dev tooling at their disposal to iterate on that application itself, but also really being able to figure out, hey, is something happening with my application? Am I, something off? Do I need to go and troubleshoot in one way or another? So you can see how this developer journey is very seamless, and under the covers, they haven't really been exposed to any of these path to production or supply chain notions. All of these sort of happens automatically. We embed a lot of the tooling, like the building and deploying capabilities or the testing capabilities in a way that it's absolutely transparent to the developer. They'll just be able to choose from some Bootstrap experience that the operators put at their disposal as part of the integration with the IDE and the dev tooling. I don't need to worry about procuring something to build images or deploy or run some of their integration testing. Now, how is the operator actually enabling the supply chain and path to production for developers and applications? And that's what I'm going to show you in the next few slides. So there's a few important pieces here. One is we're very much building on top and around of a couple of key components that existed as part of the Tanzu portfolio. One of which is what you may have heard of as Tanzu Build Service, which now becomes a component that is core to the broader Tanzu application platform. And so the idea of the Build Service is very much to give operators the ability to consistently and automatically build images in a way that supports a lot of their organizational best practices. So what we're doing with Build Service and with Tanzu application platform around Build Service is to give this really core foundational components that help in satisfying portions of that DevOps journey, and then building some automation and glue around these pieces here. So what are we doing to augment that DevOps experience around Tanzu Build Service? This is what we call the supply chain. And so what we're addressing with the supply chain, it's very much a need of operators to have an experience that helps them support the willingness to deploy this complete end-to-end pipeline or supply chain or path to production, or however you want to refer to this. And again, similarly to the developers, operators alike want to start from defaults. They don't want to have to procure all the tooling themselves. And so what we're doing with the supply chain is defining some, once more, accelerators or templates for the supply chains. We have a handful of different supply chains you can test during the beta that support an inner loop, rapid iteration type of deployment, or a staging, highly collaborative environment, or a production environment. And these supply chains are defined in a way that automatically will give you all the tools that you need. And these tools are chained and watching for specific events and reacting automatically to changes in the code and helping you with a lot of that DevOps automation. And what is important here, which I did mention earlier, but it's very explicit here, we're going to give you something out of the box. So out of the box in the beta, we'll give you Texton, for example, as a component to run your integration testing. But you do have the ability always to swap in your favorite tool. So here you have the ability with some Jenkins adapters that we give you to bring in, for example, your Jenkins CI component. And this is, of course, true across the board, not just for the CI piece here. And last but not least, we also, as part of the beta, give you the ability to secure your supply chain. So to add components like ability to sign, scan, and verify a lot of the steps in your supply chain. We, of course, want to make sure that this is once more modular. So we're going to give you some defaults and give you the ability to swap your favorite tool in. So this really supports this profound cloud transformation that we see happening at a lot of our customers' environments. And we hope that this is something that you'll find of interest to help you on this journey of transforming your applications, your DevSecOps practices, and of course, your infrastructure.